A gentleman who frequented the store that my dad recognized came up and demanded the bag, saying, "I know there's money in the bag, give it to me." Dad says, "Come on, you know I can't give you this money, it's my uncle's money, but Friday's my payday, I'd be happy to give you a loan." With that, the guy shot Dad right in the stomach. The bullet from a .32 pistol went through the man's pocket, through my dad's hand, into his lower abdomen, puncturing both of his intestines, and lodged in his gluteus maximus. Hence the name bullets in the ass. Dad, not one to be taken a shot lightly. The shot made him go down, realizing that he'd be a hit, but not realizing he had been shot. Chased down his attacker, tackled him and banged his head on the streetcar tracks, knocking him out cold. His two accomplices took him in the car and tried to make their getaway. Dad's life was saved by a former Chicago cop who was a window glazer who was working in the neighborhood, threw my dad in his car, told him, "Plug the hole with your finger and I'll get you to Cook County Hospital." And even then, Cook County was the best place to go if you had a gunshot wound. So even though he had gone through several surgeries, lost 3.5 feet of intestine, he was 16 years old and tough as nails, and Dad fought through it and survived. He was named Teen of the Month, was featured on a local TV show, and got a hero's welcome when he came home. And this is the part where the story is always kind of the most fun for me. All three of the attackers did prison time. The getaway driver turned state's evidence against the other two, so he served a lighter sentence. Dad always liked to tell us that all three of them met their demise within at least 1 year out of getting out of jail. And the story was always a little bit ambiguous whether it was, the guy who testified's family turning against the others because they were testifying against each other, whether they met their demise coincidentally because they were leading a life of crime, or possibly maybe somebody in the neighborhood had something to do with it. Nobody really knows, but Dad was just happy that they were gone. Bottom line is, Dad always taught us to stand up for ourselves, no matter the odds or no matter what we were going up against. It amuses me to see the stories. My kids watch a lot of Nickelodeon and MeTV, and they talk about how to deal with bullies. And they tell you two things: walk away and tell someone. Okay, all equally funny. Dad always taught us, you never walk away from a fair fight. And we said, "Well, Dad, what if there's 3 or 4 of them? Can we walk away then?" And he goes, "Well, you always try to talk your way out of it, son. I mean, don't be stupid, You say something like, if you feel froggy, jump, pal. Or, don't let anything stop you but fear." That was Dad's idea of trying to talk your way out of it. And if that didn't work, he said, "Well, what if there's 3 or 4? And he goes, "Go for the big one. The other 2 will fall in line." And nobody was more correct in that than Dad. If everybody had a dad like we had a dad, there wouldn't be a bullying problem because bullies would cease to exist. And we've always been proud of that. Dad always told us never start a fight, but make sure you finish it. And quite literally, every member of our little Calabrese clan, although it may not be politically correct, we're all fighters, okay? You can hear the stories about what happened to the gay prostitute who approached Dad and his friend in D.C. when he was in the Army. Not a pretty ending. Or the 3 sailors who whistled at my mom and said lewd things to her while Dad was walking down the street holding hands with her. That was disrespect he was not going to tolerate. He could also tell you about what happened when my brother Dan saved his best friend Mitch Wood from the 3 bullies in school who were picking on him, or how sorry I made the 3 guys who tried to take away my balloon and hot dog at one of my brother's football games. And even my sister Susie is a veteran of fisticuffs. She was getting picked on by the little fat mean girl in the neighborhood. Dad taught her how to apply an inescapable headlock, and the girl never messed with her again. Even our beloved mother, living in the old neighborhood on Parkside, found out that some neighbor lady was talking bad about her son. After Mom got a hold of that woman, she wouldn't come out of the house when my mom was outside. It wasn't going to happen. Anyway, we weren't just taught to fight with our fists, though. We were told to stand up to bullies in our personal and business lives. One of the motivating factors why I became an attorney was when my dad took on the company he was working for. You see, being safety conscious also costs companies a lot of money. When you tell them, "I'm not going to operate that machine," that means they're going to lose thousands of dollars a day in lost productivity and repair costs. So the company wanted to get rid of my dad. So they set him up. They had a machine that they knew my dad had reported as being unsafe, and they told him, we want you to walk that crane onto that barge. My dad told him, it's not going to happen. I told you the machine's got bad brakes, the barge could free walk into the drink, it's not going to happen. They said, so you're disobeying an order from a superior? And he said, on the basis of safety I am, and they fired him on the spot. My dad went to the union, and apparently the union had cut a deal with the company, and they wouldn't file a grievance on Dad's behalf. So there he was, no job, 2 kids to feed, I hadn't been born yet, and couldn't find a lawyer who would take the case. The company was too rich and too politically well connected. So my dad represented himself in front of the National Labor Relations Board, and he lost. And the staff attorney told him, your only option is you have to appeal to Washington, D.C. Well, still, he couldn't afford an attorney. He said, I'm going to do it on my own. Dad had a 10th grade education. He couldn't spell to save his soul. So he dictated dozens of pages of testimony and appellate brief material to my mom, who hand wrote it longhand on carbon paper. He obtained 17 affidavits from eyewitnesses who saw what happened, knew it was a setup, and all those affidavits went to Judge Nash in D.C., and the appeal was granted. Dad's job was reinstated, and he was ordered full back pay for the 1.5 years that he was off of work. His pride wouldn't let him go back to work for the company. He took the money to pay the bills that he had to pay, and he moved on. But the point is, Dad's lesson number 36, never walk away from a fight, no matter how great the odds or how big the opponent. Right will win out always. And while my father did not have a prejudiced bone in his body, he did relate to all races and ethnicities by their most basic stereotypes that we all know. So you can ask me how an ink stain caused a boy to move out of the neighborhood. You could ask the story about most of my college friends in the back will know about my black friend who came over to the house and was asked if he ever ate chitlins before. Or my Japanese date, who my dad told that in no uncertain terms that he forgave her people for Pearl Harbor. He would routinely muse aloud to my wife about, why do you think it is that the Spaniards are always portrayed as the bad guys in these swashbuckling films by Tyrone Power and Errol Flynn? You know, it is what it is. But one of my dad's best friends that he worked with on the job was a Haitian longshoreman known only as the King. He came into our house and ate like one of our other friends. And my dad also, he didn't let the Native Americans out of this. He would frequently tell the stories about the Fagawi tribe. And would also let us know that we weren't a member of that tribe. We were Italian, so we were the Awapos. On a more serious note, the beginnings of Dad's end began almost a year ago on March 26th, 2 days after our anniversary and on my brother's birthday. He suffered a debilitating stroke which left him paralyzed on the left side and left him unable to swallow or speak. He fought through that. In 6.5 months, he was at 7 different facilities, 3 hospitals, and 4 rehab centers. He endured numerous surgeries, dozens of pills, several operations, over a dozen pneumonias, hundreds of hours of physical therapy, and thousands of pills. He fought through that. He fought through living with a feeding tube for over 6 months. Anybody who knows my dad knows you never saw him without a 32-ounce tumbler of ice water. Ice water was like my dad's lifeblood. The fact that not able to take a sip of water didn't kill him is a miracle in itself. When he fought through all that, he got rid of the feeding tube, he was able to walk, he was able to come home. Last September, he was close to being back to his old self again. He fought from being bedridden to a wheelchair to a walker to a cane. Dad's biggest problem was pride. After he had been home for a couple months, he decided he didn't need physical therapy anymore. So after he stopped physical therapy, he began to fall. And the 3rd time he fell, he broke his hip. The broken hip landed him back in the hospital again, which of course led to more complications. A MRSA infection, he fought through that. Another pneumonia, he fought through that. Finally, he got his way back into the nursing home. Fought his way back to being able to walk again. Even with a healing hip, he got on that walker and he was able to go 80 or 100 steps in one direction. Just about strong enough to come home until he had to get one final pneumonia. And at that point, Dad just got sick and tired of being sick and tired, and he started to give up. Not a week ago, he was planning my parents' 55th wedding anniversary. He told us all how he was going to take us to Chins, and he was going to treat us to surf and turf. On June 1st, we had the date set, the date was planned, he was coming home. But then when he got that final pneumonia, he knew it was going to be delayed another week or two, and that's when the wind started to come out of his sails. We were given the choice of either sending my dad to be put on a dialysis machine for the rest of his life, or to bring him home and make him comfortable. And we opted for the latter. We knew our rugged individualist was not going to put up with one more day of being in a hospital bed or being hooked up to some machine that would keep him alive, artificially. We declined medical transport, saying that our dad deserved the dignity of riding home in our own van with his family the way it should be. We brought him home at about 6 o'clock on Sunday night. He was able to visit with the vast majority of his grandchildren. He had a visit from his 2 sisters earlier in the day, and his wife and his children were around him. The hospice worker showed up at about 8 o'clock and told us how horrific the next few weeks were going to be, that it was going to be a slow, long, painful process. And Dad was there listening to all of this, and I can only believe that he said, I'm not going to let that happen to my family. So he hung in there long enough for my sister to come home at about 10 o'clock. We gathered around Dad, held his hands, formed a circle, said a prayer, let him know, we're all here, Dad. You don't have to fight anymore. You can let go. Once he knew he was home, once he knew his loved ones were there and that it was okay, he spared us that horror. He gave us the greatest blessing he could by going out of this world on the same terms that he lived in it, his way. We started to regret that Dad died before I could fulfill some of the childhood promises that I made to him. Dad never got home to see his home country of Italy, and I always promised him that I would take him someday to see Bari. Another promise I made to him was when I was about 5 years old, we were watching a special on the Great Pyramid at Giza, and Dad marveled at how such an engineering miracle could have been achieved so long ago with such little technology. And I promised him at that point that I would take him to see the Great Pyramid as well. And while we tried to make plans in recent years to make it happen, it just never did. So we're going to fulfill those as well. Following all of our services tomorrow, Dad's going to be cremated, and a portion of his remains is going to be buried at the Abraham Lincoln Military Cemetery, which he earned through his military service during the Korean conflict. The remainder is going to be divided up between my mother, father, and my brother, and my mother, father, me, my mom, my brother, and my sister. And we're going to make good on those promises. Dad is going to see Bari, and Dad is going to see the Great Pyramid. And he's going to become a permanent part of those places the way they were always a permanent part of him during his life. Dad was always the eternal optimist. He taught us to look at the bright side of any situation and to have no regrets. The only stupid question was the one not asked, and every experience was a good one because you could learn from it. When my parents were living in New Mexico, and it came time for the end of a visit and we had to go, he'd say, don't say goodbye, just say see you later, because we'll see each other again soon. In the same way, we thank you all for joining us in celebrating Dad's life. And we've asked all of you, any of you that knew my dad, to share any little stories you may have. We've got a video camera here. Tell us a little snippet you remember about Dad. Something he said, something he did, a joke he told you, something he repeated. Because those are the things that we want to live with and we want to remember. To continue to celebrate Dad's life and to make some new memories. So for many of you, you can say, see you later, Big Sam. We'll meet again, my good friend. I consider myself especially fortunate because not only do I carry his memories in my head and his love in my heart, I get to see him every morning when I look in the mirror. Thank you.